Welcome in the booth after a big win for Ohio State here at Michigan State. I'm Joel Klatt. This show is sponsored by Dr. Pepper. Remember, at every home gate and tailgate, it is the one that fans crave. So a huge win for Ohio State, and they got right in some areas in which they had not been right before. Coming into this ball game and coming into this week, you could say that the one constant for Ohio State was the fact that they had a great quarterback that could throw it pretty consistently on the outside. The two question marks were, could they run the football, and was their defense going to show up and be the dominant Ohio State defense that we have seen in the past? Both of those questions were answered today, and they were answered with an affirmative yes. They are back in those areas. They ran the ball really well at the #1 rush defense in the country in the second half specifically. They did that with an interesting wrinkle. First of all, it was Mike Weber, not J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins had 160 last week against Nebraska. This week it was Weber, who had over 100 yards against the #1 rush defense in all of college football. They averaged over 4 yards per carry in that second half. It was a real masterclass in really two things. The change in schematics, getting away from the interior run and going to the outside. And then the second is the ability of the coaching staff to find a wrinkle that found success. Tate Martell. I don't think it's the end-all, be-all for them, but I do think that what you're going to see moving forward for Ohio State is that Tate Martell enters the game in some of these short yardage situations in which they have to run the ball. They need to run the ball because he gives them the best ability to do that in those situations. Here's something that you have to understand about those short yardage running situations. There's always going to be an unblocked defender. It just is the way that the math works out. There's always going to be an unblocked defender, and the only way that you can occupy that player or account for that player is by running the quarterback or using the quarterback's threat of run to keep him away from the ball carrier. They did that with Tate Martell. A crucial third down late in the ball game. He comes in and he gets a zone read. Bang. The defensive end Camper's got to sit right there at the line of scrimmage, and Weber's able to burst through the line of scrimmage for a first down. They got movement on the interior because they were able to block down and not block the defensive end. And then, boom, there you go. You've got some run game. They also ran a little bit of a quarterback counter with Tate Martell, which had some success. It got them down to the 1 yard line and led directly to the Paris Campbell touchdown on a little bit of kind of a speed sweep type of play. So Ohio State finds the run game. They didn't do that by just hammering right down the middle of the defense. They changed the scheme a little bit, went outside. They changed the personnel a little bit, brought Tate Martell into the ball game, allowed him to be effective, and because of that, they ran the ball really well. Then the defense. The defense was dominant today. Absolutely dominant. The pass rush wasn't prolific, but they were good enough to cause both quarterbacks for Michigan State a lot of problems. Rocky Lombardi had a lot of problems throwing the football. Brian Lewerke had a lot of problems throwing the football. It reminded me a ton of what Michigan was able to do to this Michigan State offense, which is they just can't throw the ball. They've got injuries on the outside. They finally get Cody White back, and yet their quarterback, Brian Lewerke, is hindered with a shoulder injury. Lombardi gave them a little bit of energy, namely a long pass down the right side to Cody White, and then he took off on a little bit of a quarterback design run. But outside of that, they didn't really do much. So it was a dominant performance by the front seven for Ohio State, the back end, and the secondary. They tackled well. They covered well. A lot of PBUs, pass breakups in the back end, so they did a really nice job. Then you get to, I don't want to call it the surprise, but the most dominant aspect of what Ohio State did today, and that was the punt team. You don't normally say that, but absolutely the punt team was the most dominant part of this game on either side. Drew Chrisman, who started this game off with an atrocious 4-yard punt. He shanked it off to the side of his foot. It goes into the stands, and you think to yourself, well, this is not going to go all that well. And what does he do? He comes back and puts 5 punts inside the 7-yard line, 4 of them inside the 5, 2 of them inside the 2, and both of the punts that wound up inside the 2-yard line turned into points directly for Ohio State on the ensuing drives. They had to snap it out of the end zone, Michigan State did, for a punt. So they get a safety for Ohio State. And then on the next time, he pins them at the 2-yard line, fumble recovered for Ohio State for a touchdown. Drew Chrisman and the Gunners on the outside, Terry McLaurin as well as Jeffrey Okudah, pinning the ball inside the 5. That was a masterclass. You put that tape together and you show it to every punt team across the country till the end of time, and you say this is exactly how you down the ball inside the 5-yard line to gain an advantage for your football team. So it was quite a day for Ohio State. Here's why it's important. Those are the three areas, special teams, defense, and the run game, that were the biggest question marks for this Ohio State team. Like I started off by saying, if you answer those in the affirmative, now all of a sudden all you've got to do is piece together a game in which you play your best in every category. And what do you have? I think a potential conference winner and a potential playoff team. If this team plays their best, I think that they can beat Michigan at home. If they play their best, they can be the Big Ten champion, and they would be 12-1 Big Ten champions. What we've seen so far through the history of the playoff is that it matters a lot how you're playing at the end of the year. Well, if Ohio State is playing that well at the end of the year, very similar to 2014 when they run roughshod over Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game and then got included in the playoffs, they beat Alabama, they beat Oregon, and then win the national championship. Maybe. Listen, this is a really talented team that's young in some areas, and they're just developing. Buckeye fans, stop panicking. You Buckeye fans, you're on this team hard. Trust me, I hear it, I read it. All right, but this team is putting together right now some pieces to where they could be very good down the stretch. Wouldn't you much rather your team, Buckeye fans, be great at the end of the year versus be great in October? Granted, I'll give you this. You would have loved to see them beat Purdue, and that was an egg that they laid that day. There's no doubt about that, but they have fixed some of those problems. They can run it now. This was the best run defense in America, and they just ran the ball really well in the second half. Really well. Mike Weber over 100 yards. That defense was suspect at best against Purdue. They've changed the scheme a little bit. You've got some other players in there playing really well, namely a guy like Brendan White, the safety. And guess what? That was a dominant defensive performance. So, Buckeye fans, if I were to tell you at the beginning of the year that you were in a game with Michigan in which the winner goes to the Big Ten championship game, that you were still alive for the playoff, knowing that Urban Meyer was going to be suspended for the first 3 games, knowing that you were having a brand new starting quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, and that you would be playing your best football at that time when Michigan comes to the shoe, would you take it? My guess is that you would. My guess is that you would. And that looks like it's happening for the Buckeyes. So a big credit to Urban Meyer and that entire Buckeye program right now. Real quick around the country, I do want to touch on West Virginia very quickly because what's happening for Ohio State is also happening for West Virginia. They're playing their best football, what seems like right now late in the season. Big win over Texas last week that Gus and I and Ginny saw. Now this week they get TCU into Morgantown and just absolutely hammered them. Will Grier is on pace to go to New York for the Heisman Trophy. I think Dwayne Haskins should go to New York for the Heisman Trophy. Quite frankly, it should be 5 quarterbacks that are at least in New York being celebrated as finalists for the Heisman Trophy. I think it should be Tua Tagovailoa, it should be Kyler Murray, it should be Gardner Minshew, it should be Will Grier and Dwayne Haskins. Those are your 5 players that should be in New York being celebrated for the Heisman Trophy. Will Grier was special again today. He's got that deep core of wide receivers that he can throw to. Dana Holgorsen gives him a game plan that he can go out there and be successful. And West Virginia now, all of a sudden, they go to Stillwater next week. Then they've got Norman in Morgantown. And you're talking about a team that controls their own destiny to get to 12-1 and potentially a conference championship. And you never know with the playoff committee, and you never know what type of chaos will ensue down the stretch. So West Virginia fans, I know you're happy, but mostly Buckeye fans, would you take it? My answer to you is yes. Yes, you would. Would you want to play your best football with a division championship on the line with Michigan and potentially a spot in the college football playoff, even if it's on the outside chance of that? My answer would be yes. You would take that. This has been In the Booth. I'm Joel Klatt. Be with us next week. Don't know where we're going just yet, but we'll be with you here bringing you college football. It's a great sport. Enjoy the games the rest of the day. Enjoy Bedlam, which should be a phenomenal game as Oklahoma hosts Oklahoma State, and enjoy all the games the rest of the night. This has been In the Booth, sponsored by Dr. Pepper. Remember, at every home gate and tailgate, it is the one that fans crave, and enjoy your day of college football.